Hey guys, Michael here. This is another video in the ongoing series that is the attempt to try to make siege battles in Warhammer 3 better, and you can replace the word better with tolerable, and I wouldn't complain too much. I know some of you feel like there's really literally nothing that can be done to save siege battles in this game. I personally don't subscribe to that. I think that there are some things that can be done to make these siege battles much, much better, but I understand that some of you feel like that it's a lost cause. But anyway, for those of you who feel like, yeah, there are things that we can do to make them better, maybe not perfect, but we're working on it because we keep covering more and more mods that that each one incrementally does make them a little bit better. And so that's what I've got here today. It's actually going to be a combination of a couple of mods, but the main one that I want to focus on is one that was recommended to me by several of you on some of the more recent videos that I've uploaded, including the mod author himself. So we have Antagonistes, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. He's the mod author, and he created this one called More Consistent Siege Attackers. Now, if you take a look here at his recommendations, he does recommend a few other mods, and I'm going to talk about a couple of those as well. But let's talk about his first, and then I'll talk about those. So it's a pretty simple mod. I certainly believe that you can use some of the others that I have recommended in addition to this one, and that does include one right here that he is also recommending, which is the No Real-Time Building Reborn. Personally, I like tougher siege tweaks as well. He hasn't mentioned that here, but anyway, I just want to make it clear, this does not invalidate some of the others that I have recommended. But anyway, talking about specifically what this one does, it's pretty simple. Basically, it's a sort of a more realistic but also reasonably practical way to address who gets siege attacker in this game. Now, in their infinite wisdom, CA gave every single legendary lord the siege attacker trait. And some of you can probably remind me, I feel like it was done a while ago for benefit of the AI to be able to actually launch siege battles. I don't remember the specifics about it. So anyway, if anybody wants to remind me and the rest of us exactly why CA made that decision, I just kind of in the back of my mind remember them making some kind of an announcement about it, why they felt like it made sense to give the siege attacker trait to every legendary lord. Well, this mod does take it away. And so if there is something where that's going to screw up the AI, then let's talk about it and let's find out if that's the type of issue that that we're willing to accept, or if it is in fact something pretty significant that's going to want to stop a lot of people from using a mod like this. But I didn't really notice. I tested out 3 different campaigns, not real deep into them, but a little bit. And I didn't really see anything that jumped out to me as a big problem. So anyway, what it's doing is it is taking siege attacker away from every unit that does not belong to the following categories. And incidentally, this includes legendary lords, which we will show in a moment. I will jump in and show a few examples in game after we talk about the brief, as brief as I can be, description of what the mod does. So as you can see here, artillery is going to have the siege attacker, which makes sense. Now, one just a clarification is it's going to include all artillery, not just like the types of heavy artillery that you would normally think of as being able to break down gates. There's no distinction being made about, between heavy artillery and let's call it light or anti-infantry artillery. And there's reasons for that, which I won't go into a whole lot of detail here. Also then heavy war machines, and then finally giant single entity monsters. And so again, it's a little bit more thematic, a little bit more realistic. It is going to have slight changes to the gameplay, but not actually as significant as I was expecting it to be, which again, I will show you in my examples. Now, he does make a mention right here. This mod causes Malice Darkblade to not be able to conquer his first settlement on turn 1. However, this is counterbalanced by the fact that the garrison is likely to sally out during the end turn, so you can kill them immediately and take the settlement. Although you won't be able to recruit new units immediately, you also won't be able to get that first turn start on building new buildings. But anyway, it's a small trade-off for people who are interested in a mod like this. Okay, anyway, some of the recommended mods I do want to mention. Now, Ass Ladders Be Gone. This is one I've done an entire video on. The TLDR, for those of you who missed that video and aren't interested in watching it or have forgotten what I had to say. I think it's a fine mod. I think it does what it's intended to do, and I understand why people like to use it. I personally don't use it because, to me, creating ladders, it is not unrealistic as far as I'm concerned. Ladders are actually incredibly simple to build. Armies traveled around with engineers and could build ladders at a moment's notice in most cases anyway, so I don't see that as at all unrealistic. It's not what bothers me about the ladders. What bothers me about the ladders is the fact that it's not at all punishing to use ladders in vanilla to climb up the walls. So I actually use a mod that slows down wall climbing up ladders and makes it more fatiguing. But anyway, that's a whole separate video, like I said. All right, anyway, faster siege equipment construction is one that I did go ahead and use in my testing, and I will show this off in a moment. As I've mentioned before, I do recommend that people use no real-time building reborn, which is a really nice mod, which basically just stops the arcade feel of, the tower defense feel of of siege battles, and instead you have to build all your towers and barricades at the very beginning before the battle begins. No siege barricades is one that I'm tempted to use, but I haven't tried it yet. It did look like there were some comments where this is not exactly functioning as expected, but anybody with experience with that particular one can feel free to share their experiences. And then more thematic wall breakers is another one I did go ahead and test out, and I'm going to show some examples of that as well. So really quickly, let's go ahead and talk about those. And as you can see, I've had a back and forth here with the mod author here on the mod page if you're interested in seeing more detail about the artillery question. Okay, so as I mentioned, more thematic wall breakers. Again, pretty simple mod, and all three of these that I'm going to talk about are pretty simple. The main one is the one I just covered, but this basically just gives the wall breaker attribute to some additional units, and he lists them all right here. Again, for anybody not familiar, wall breaker attribute allows you to target walls, and they do extra damage against buildings. And then finally, the faster siege equipment construction. This just basically makes it faster to build your siege equipment. And the reason why that is going to be of interest to a lot of people is because there's going to be more occasions where if you're using the more consistent siege attackers mod, you're not going to be able to immediately walk up and launch the attack. The whole idea behind it is if you haven't come with the right units, mainly, units with the siege attacker trait, if you haven't brought any of those, then you can't attack right away, and instead you're going to have to build some siege equipment. Personally, I prefer that. Historically, realistically, I think that makes more sense. You shouldn't really be able to walk up to major walled cities, attack them with a frontal assault, and it be as easy as it is in the vanilla game. So that's sort of the whole philosophy behind all of these mods for the most part. Okay, so anyway, let's go ahead and then jump in game, and I will show you some examples. So the first thing that I do want to show here is actually vanilla. This is how it works for Grimgor in vanilla, where he walks right up to a walled city. You can see how much in terms of the I forget what it's called, the manpower, I guess, to build the siege equipment. Anyway, he could attack it right away because he does, of course, have Siege Attacker as a trait for Grimgor himself, as well as for the Doom Diver Catapult. So you could go ahead and launch it. It would be a Pyrrhic victory in vanilla. Let's go ahead and just keep this in the back of our minds, how it works in vanilla, and compare it to what happens in the mod. So here we are, same exact situation, different campaign, but same exact situation. I just followed the same exact process to get to the same point here. This is about turn 3 or 4. Again, I chose Grimgor because he doesn't start with the major city, so I knew he had to take a walled city to complete his first province. And it looks like it's turn number 4. So like I said here, I followed exactly the same process as vanilla. You can see it looks like the same result, but one immediate difference that jumps out at you is that it's less manpower to build your siege equipment. So if you do decide to wait a turn building up your siege equipment, then you would have more of that available to you when you launch the attack. That is indeed what I'm going to go ahead and do here. But as you can see, Grimgor no longer has siege attacker trait, but the Doomdiver catapult as a piece of artillery still does. So here we go. We go ahead and take a look at how quickly now we can build our siege equipment compared to how it is in vanilla. So again, it's just because you're going to find yourself in more situations where you're not able to launch the attack right away. I'd kind of, generally speaking, just like the idea of having more value to the siege equipment. So I think it does probably make sense to be able to build it a little bit faster as well. And so even though I didn't have to, I go ahead and wait the one turn to launch this particular attack. So we could auto-resolve it with a decisive victory, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to have a little bit of an example here of how you now have all of these extra siege towers that you can bring to bear during the battle. It just, to me, it feels more like a proper siege battle when you're incentivized, or in some cases forced, to have to build siege equipment in order to launch the battle. And then when you fight the battle, you're actually genuinely using the siege equipment. It actually contributes a meaningful amount to the battle itself. Okay, now I wanted to show another example of a legendary lord. This time, I mentioned previously that the legendary lords had siege attacker removed from them. But in this particular case, if we take a look at Kolek Suneater, because he is a monstrous unit, he is one of the few legendary lords who does keep the siege attacker trait, which I think makes sense. And again, this is the side effect of the combination of mods that we're using, is we're playing into the strengths that makes sense for some legendary lords to have over others. Now, of course, it wouldn't really matter for Kolek, because this being an ogre, sort of a pseudo major settlement, it's not really a major settlement. It's a dark fortress, so it's a major settlement as far as the Warriors of Chaos are concerned. But for the ogres, it's not. Anyway, it's not actually walled. So whether or not he had the siege attacker, it doesn't actually affect the outcome of his opening turn. Okay, and then finally, one more example that I wanted to show here. This is a Grombrindal campaign. He's another one who doesn't start with a walled city. He starts with a minor settlement. So he has to actually take a few turns here to work his way up towards Altar of Ultimate Darkness. And what's interesting about this is that Grombrindal, obviously, he's not a monster. He doesn't have siege attacker anymore, nor does he have any units in his starting army that have siege attacker trait. Now, the miners are one that gained the wall breaker attribute as a result of one of the mods that we're using. But as you can see here, we can roll up and we can lay siege, but we cannot launch the attack on the Altar of Ultimate Darkness. And so this is what you're going to see happening depending on which faction you choose, depending on what units are in your armies. You're not always going to be able to launch your frontal assault here right away, but instead, sometimes you are going to have to build up your siege equipment. Again, I like it. It's not going to be for everybody, but so in any case, as you can see here, we have no choice in the matter. We're going to have to wait that extra turn, build up our siege equipment, because we don't have any artillery or any units with siege attacker in our army at all. Now, in this particular case, it doesn't really matter a whole lot, because as it turns out, the Skaven garrison is going to come out and sally out and attack us, and we're going to wipe them out, and we're going to take the settlement anyway. But obviously, we would have been able to take it on the very next turn anyway as well. But all right, anyway, that's these mods in a nutshell. Again, it's just a combination of mods to kind of rework the traits, make it so that siege attacker and wall breaker traits only apply to units who thematically, realistically it makes sense for, and then also to make the siege equipment that much more valuable in battle. It gives you the opportunity to build them faster, and like I said, to me, it doesn't really feel unrealistic that you should be able to build them a little bit faster. I don't exactly know how long a single turn is supposed to represent in this game. It's obviously somewhat abstract, but it doesn't feel too outlandish to me that if you wait a single turn, let's say it's a month or whatever, that's enough time to lay siege. It's obviously enough time to actually cause some attrition to whatever army you're besieging. So, you know, considering the fact that that means there is some amount of time that is passing by, it feels like it's realistic then to also be able to build some extra siege equipment in that amount of time as well. So anyway, let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you have any experience with these mods. Let me know in particular if you remember why CA gave the siege attacker trait to every legendary lord. One more time, want to, you know, give my thanks to the mod author, both for making the mod, but also for calling my attention to it. One of the really great things about being able to make these videos and kind of build a little bit of a community here is I get, you know, feedback on stuff like this, things that I did not know existed, and an awful lot of these mods that I've been covering recently are actually mods that have been suggested by many of you. So I do very much appreciate that. And since I'm already, you know, on that note of talking about appreciation, for anybody who is interested in supporting the channel, making it a little bit easier for me to be able to keep making videos like this, please do know that I have a Patreon. It's not an expectation I have. I love the idea that YouTube is a free channel, so I don't want anybody to feel like they, you know, like this is an expectation I have, like they need to do it. But if you have a couple of bucks laying around, you want to support, you like seeing mod review discussions like this or any of the other types of videos that I do on this channel, I would always very much appreciate it. It really is surprisingly meaningful to a YouTuber to know that people do really appreciate their content enough to throw a couple of bucks at them. So anyway, just enough said on that. Just wanted to let everybody know that that was available if you want to support the channel. I'm obviously not very good at this whole YouTubing thing yet. I don't have a script written out for any of that. But all right, anyway, thanks everybody so much for watching. Again, let me know if you have any more ideas about other types of mods that you would like to see me cover, or any other general Warhammer strategy or, you know, any type of discussion like that. I'd be happy to consider it. So, all right, with all that, thanks very much for watching and listening. I will see you all in the next video.
Smash 'em!